Thank the chair. I also want to thank Chairman Calvert for managing the time tonight and for getting us to this point. By my calculation, it's been 5 years since we've been able to have these kind of debates on the floor of the House, and here we are at 12:30 at night. Speaking for myself, I've listened to the entire debate tonight here on the floor, starting with votes after 6:30. And, Mr. Chairman, I was struck by the amount of amendments having to do with the Endangered Species Act, number one, and number two, having to deal with the lists, whether threatened or endangered lists of Endangered Species Act. Clearly, and I would agree with the gentlelady on the other side of the aisle in this, reform and major reform of Endangered Species Act is needed. That will take some time. That discussion has been ongoing. It's not that it hasn't already started in this Congress or in previous Congresses, and I look forward to being part of that solution in a very constructive way. But what about the near term? We have people, human constituents, who are really suffering, and that's what my amendment, Mr. Chairman, is about tonight. You know, summer is a big time for any industry that depends on tourism to survive. I offer this amendment out of concern for two lake communities in my district. And just last year, during the height of the summer's busy tourist season, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service required that the Northern Indiana Public Service Company, locally known as NIPSCO, release more water into the Tippecanoe River from Lake Freeman to protect a bed of endangered freshwater mussels that live further down the Tippecanoe River, all under the guise of the Endangered Species Act. Now, as a result, in a matter of days, water levels on Lake Freeman dropped dramatically. I have visited with local residents near Lake Freeman multiple times and seen the lake in person. And growing up during the summers, I spent my time on the sister lake, Schaefer. Now, many who live and work near the lake discovered to their surprise their boats were stuck, businesses in jeopardy, and home values were going down. But more than that, stumps were rising out of the water. Personal health and safety were also in jeopardy as a result. Now, I immediately contacted Fish and Wildlife, and I want to applaud them for their responsiveness and NIPSCO for working together. We created a technical assistance letter, otherwise known as a TAL, and it's my estimation that that's going to have some effect. And again, I appreciate the reasonableness of all involved. But the current plan there is a temporary fix, and really we ought to be able to do more. Now, currently, Fish and Wildlife receives funding to enforce the Endangered Species Act, which protects 6 species of mussels in the river, as the clerk mentioned as we read the amendment. The Endangered Species Act gives the highest priority to protecting the listed species, and there's little anyone can do in terms of exceptions or exemptions or even any kind of balancing test to make sure that there's not a solution that could be a win-win. It's a very draconian law, a strict compliance. No balancing test, no room for discretion or creative solution. And that's where this reform is needed. The statute, like I said, provides no balancing test for weighing the economic harms, and the Supreme Court of this land has refused to allow us or even lower courts to construct their own tests, us as citizens. So compliance with this law, as currently written, requires diverting water from Lake Freeman into the Tippecanoe River to balance water levels despite consideration of the economic impact and human safety. So in essence, my amendment limits the funding mechanism Fish and Wildlife would be able to use to enforce the Act, the Endangered Species Act, with respect to these 6 types of mussels, and eliminates the financial repercussions for failing to enforce the law. Speaking firsthand with residents, lowering these water levels in Lake Freeman negatively affects the community and small businesses that rely on the tourists and enjoy the lake and the steady water level. Lower water levels also pose dangerous swimming conditions to both boaters and swimmers as formerly underwater tree stumps breach the water. This is unnecessary and a preventable hazard to those that use the lake, and again, in a win-win way. And it's all because of this draconian law that, although well-intended, is in badly need of reform so that its practical effect can be overhauled and any of its misguided applications halted. Hoosiers, like myself, are just as concerned for the environment as they are for their incomes and family recreation. So it's not about anti-environmentalism, but they believe, like I said, there is a win-win solution here if only the law would allow such a solution to exist. In the meantime, we ought to defund Fish and Wildlife's ability to enforce this law as it's written. And while I value nature and seek to protect endangered animals, the reward of protecting the mussel does not outweigh the economic damage done to this community or the personal safety or health of my human constituents. The fact that no balancing test was attempted or debated or implemented, and